The search for Dylan Redwine had been ongoing for months, an entire community desperate for answers. The La Plata County Sheriff's Office had combed through dense forests, crisscrossed the mountains, and scoured every possible hiding place. But it was on a quiet afternoon in June 2013 when something unexpected happened. Bones were found, hidden from sight for months. It was the final piece of a twisted puzzle no one had expected to solve. It was Dylan Redwine's bones. But the real shock was this. The person who should have been looking for him, the one who should have been leading the charge in the search, the father who was supposed to protect him, was already a suspect. Mark Redwine, Dylan's father, had been the one who reported his son missing back in November 2012, but now his role in Dylan's disappearance was becoming clearer by the day. The discovery of Dylan's remains wasn't just about finding a body. It was about uncovering a web of lies, strange behaviors, and chilling secrets no one saw coming. And this was just the beginning. The truth that would come to light was far darker than anyone had imagined. But before we begin, I just want to take a moment to thank you, my incredible viewers and subscribers. Your likes, shares, and thoughtful comments don't just support this channel, they help keep these stories alive. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and become part of this growing community that believes every story deserves to be told, and no victim should ever be forgotten. Dylan Nicholas Redwine was born on February 6, 1999, in Denver, Colorado. His parents, Mark Redwine and Elaine Hatfield Hall, had 2 children together. Dylan had an older brother, Corey Redwine, who was 7 years older than him, and a half-brother, Brandon Redwine, from Mark's previous marriage. The family lived in Bayfield, Colorado, a small, tight-knit community nestled in the rugged, mountainous southwest corner of the state. Mark, a long-haul trucker, was often on the road for days, sometimes weeks at a time. This left Elaine to care for the children mostly on her own. Over the years, the constant strain of Mark's absence and the tension in their marriage took its toll on the family. By 2007, after 18 years together, Mark and Elaine's relationship unraveled. But the divorce was far from amicable, and a bitter custody battle followed. Mark, who had been largely absent during the children's upbringing, fought fiercely for custody of Dylan and his brother, Corey. During the divorce proceedings, Mark made a chilling comment to Elaine. He threatened that he would the children before he would allow her to gain custody. But Dylan's life wasn't defined by the turmoil between his parents. He was a fun-loving teenager, full of energy and a strong sense of humor. Dylan was known among his peers as a trickster, always pulling pranks and keeping his friends laughing. His playful nature made him popular among his group of close-knit friends, a group that remained loyal even after Dylan moved over 300 miles away to live with his mother in Monument, Colorado. Baseball was one of Dylan's greatest passions. He loved the game, often spending hours practicing or watching his favorite team, the Boston Red Sox. He was a sports fan, and while he had many friends, he also enjoyed his time alone, indulging in video games and spending time outside. Dylan had the typical teenage spirit, bright, outgoing, and with a personality that made it easy for him to connect with others. So earlier in 2011, during a road trip with their father, Mark Redwine, Corey and Dylan Redwine came across disturbing images on Mark's laptop. The 2 brothers were in the car with Mark, and as they were looking through his laptop, they discovered explicit and unsettling photos. The images depicted Mark dressed in women's lingerie, wearing a wig, and engaging in acts that were highly disturbing, including one where he appeared to be consuming human feces from a dirty diaper. This act is known as coprophilia, a fetish where an individual derives erotic pleasure from human feces. Corey, who was 20 at the time, immediately snapped photos of these images with his phone. He sent them to his father, taunting him with messages like, "Hey beautiful, you are what you eat," and calling him sweetie and a eating coward. Dylan and Corey were horrified by what they found, and the images shattered the remaining respect Dylan had for his father. He was deeply disturbed by the discovery. Corey later said he regretted sending those photos to Mark. Dylan, who was extremely upset by the images, wanted to use them as leverage during an argument where Mark accused Elaine and Corey of being bad influences. Dylan planned to confront Mark with the photos, feeling that it would force his father to acknowledge who he truly was. The year 2012 marked a pivotal moment in Dylan's life. Elaine was granted full custody of both Dylan and Corey, despite Mark's objections. After a contentious legal battle, Elaine's lawyer argued that Dylan should stay with her, as Mark's visitation rights had been limited due to his unpredictable behavior. The decision, however, came with a heavy emotional toll. Dylan, although relieved to be with his mother, was forced to visit Mark regularly as court ordered. Dylan's reluctance to visit Mark for Thanksgiving in 2012 was intense. He had voiced his objections time and time again. He didn't want to go. But this visit wasn't a choice for him. It was court-mandated, something he had no power over. His mother, Elaine, had warned him about the consequences if he didn't go. The legal battle over custody had been long and bitter, and Elaine knew that refusing the visit could jeopardize the custody agreement she fought so hard to win. So, reluctantly, Dylan packed his things, got into the car, and was driven to the airport by his mother. At the airport, Dylan sent a quick text to his mom, "I'm here, but I don't want to be." The words felt cold, but Elaine could feel the weight behind them. She reminded him that he had to go, and he would have to make the best of it. Dylan responded with a frown emoji, the last of many signs that he was deeply upset. The holiday that was supposed to be filled with joy and family warmth felt more like a prison sentence for him. He was about to spend a long weekend with a father he had lost respect for. Mark picked him up from the airport around 6 p.m., but there was no warmth in their greeting. The two made their way to Walmart and picked out a few items, but there was no joy in the process. Later, Dylan's desire to see his friends became clear when he asked Mark if he could stay the night at a friend's house. Mark refused, dismissing the request with a sharp no. Dylan wanted to be anywhere but there. He planned to meet up with his friend Ryan Nava the very next morning. They'd texted back and forth, and Dylan was eager to leave. But his father's refusal left him stuck in a place where he didn't want to be. That night, Dylan tried to make the best of the situation, texting Ryan to confirm plans. 6:30 a.m. tomorrow, Dylan had written. At 9:37 p.m., Dylan sent his final message from his phone, his last known communication before his disappearance. The message was to Ryan, confirming their plans. After that, the phone went quiet. There was no further text activity, no social media posts, no communication with anyone. The next morning at 6:46 a.m., Ryan sent a message to Dylan. "Where are you?" But there was no response. Dylan had always been quick to reply, but this time he didn't. Something was off. The morning of November 19th, 2012 started like any other for Mark Redwine, except it didn't. When he woke up, Dylan was gone. Mark, still groggy from his nap the previous day, searched the house. He claimed he couldn't find Dylan. The TV was on, the cereal was untouched on the table, and nothing seemed out of place. Except Dylan wasn't there. He wasn't in his bed, he wasn't in the living room, and there was no sign of his phone, his backpack, or his fishing pole. The house was eerily quiet. Mark's story about what happened next was troublingly inconsistent. He reported Dylan missing to the authorities, claiming that he'd gone out to run errands in the morning and returned around 11 a.m. to find his son missing. Yet, his demeanor didn't match the urgency of the situation. He showed no panic, no fear, no distress, just a strange nonchalance, as though it were no big deal. But the inconsistencies were clear. Mark had told authorities that Dylan had left with his fishing pole. That was a point of contention. Dylan didn't fish. Not like that. His mother, Elaine, immediately found this odd, and the idea that he'd go off on his own in the dead of winter, leaving everything behind, was beyond believable. Elaine didn't buy it for a second. Mark's version of events was full of holes. Then he claimed Dylan was upset, that he left to go see a friend, but there was no evidence to back that up too. Also, when police arrived to search the house, they were immediately struck by how calm and unbothered Mark seemed. He didn't appear distraught or even worried. Not once did he ask about the search efforts. Instead, he seemed more interested in distancing himself from the investigation, as if trying to appear innocent by staying out of the way. Meanwhile, Elaine was beside herself with worry. She immediately pointed out Mark's claim that Dylan was watching Nickelodeon on the TV. Dylan wasn't into Nickelodeon anymore. He'd outgrown it long ago and had been more interested in MTV and other things typical of his age. Elaine's instinct was telling her this was another lie. Mark didn't even know his own son well enough to come up with a believable excuse for his behavior. On November 20th, 2012, just a day after Dylan's disappearance was reported, Elaine, Corey, and Mike Hall, Elaine's fiancé, arrived in Bayfield. They drove 6 hours from Colorado Springs, and upon arrival, they immediately went to the La Plata County Sheriff's Office to offer their help. The search began in earnest, but it was clear that the terrain in this remote area, near Mark's home, the San Juan Mountains, and Vallecito Lake, was going to make finding Dylan a monumental challenge. By November 21st, the search efforts were in full swing. Search teams equipped with ATVs, drones, and K-9 units scoured the area, hoping to catch any scent or clue that could lead them to Dylan. The San Juan Mountains were a particularly difficult place to navigate, with its rugged terrain and steep canyons. The K-9 units, specifically trained for situations like this, were sent out in hopes of picking up a trail that might lead them closer to the boys' location. They also focused on Vallecito Lake, which was nearby, and had previously been mentioned by Mark as a possible area Dylan could have wandered to. Days went by, and each attempt yielded no leads. The weather in the mountainous region didn't help. The cold and snow covered the ground, and the landscape became even more difficult to navigate. Despite the setbacks, Elaine, Corey, and other family members were relentless in their efforts to find Dylan. They raised over $50,000 as a reward for any hint that could lead to his whereabouts. The community rallied behind them and their search continued, but no answers seemed forthcoming.
Every day I wake up and Dylan's not home and it's just another empty day. I choose hope for Dylan because, as a mother, it's very difficult to deal with something like this, but I have no reason to believe that he's not, and so I will always choose hope for Dylan. We'll always look for him, and we will find him.
November 22nd, Thanksgiving Day, brought no new developments. Still, Elaine and Corey, driven by love and determination, didn't stop. They searched high and low, covering as much ground as possible. Every area was checked, but the results were the same. Nothing. Mark remained strangely absent from the searches, and his behavior continued to raise suspicion. He didn't seem to share the same urgency as those around him. His nonchalance stood in stark contrast to the rest of the community's resolve. By November 23rd, Elaine was starting to lose hope, but she knew she had to keep going. The search teams continued to scour the vast, rugged terrain, using every tool at their disposal. However, the area they were covering was vast and remote. ATVs and drones had proven to be effective, but nothing seemed to provide a clear lead. The K-9 units had also been out searching the area, but had not found anything substantial that would suggest Dylan's whereabouts. Mark's media appearances were an odd mix of desperation and detachment. He spoke to reporters, trying to paint a picture of a grieving father, devastated by the disappearance of his son. He described how deeply he missed Dylan and how the situation was tearing him apart. But his calm demeanor didn't match his words.
Dylan, my prayers are with you, and I love you very much. He was the light of my life, and he meant everything to me. And I just want him home, just like everybody else does. And that's why, we got to keep searching for him, because somebody knows something. We got to find him, and we need to know that he's okay. And I don't want the focus to be mainly on me. I want the focus to remain on Dylan, because that's the most important thing right now. And, the process of what's going on with the authorities and the people handling this is to search my home. All they had to do was ask. I would have willingly let them come in and do it. I've given them, I've cooperated with them in every way. Anything that they've asked me for, I've been willing to do. Anything that they've suggested that I do, whether it be sitting at the house waiting for the phones to ring or Dylan to walk through the front door, I'm willing to do whatever I need to do. And that's what I want everybody to understand, is that, my focus is on Dylan and what's going on with him, and trying to keep the investigation moving forward in whatever necessary means that is.
Then came the polygraph tests. Elaine, desperate to clear her name, agreed to take one. The results were unequivocal. She passed with flying colors. There was no doubt in the minds of the investigators. Elaine was telling the truth. Her credibility was solidified.
My gut feeling is that Dylan's dad had something to do or knows something more than he's giving us information about. I wish he would talk to us, but he won't do that.
Mark, on the other hand, faced a much different outcome. He took the polygraph test, but it was a disaster. He failed, miserably. Later, he would claim that there had been a mix-up, that he was misinformed about the results. The most telling moment came during his appearance on the Dr. Phil show. He had agreed to take a polygraph test on air, hoping that it would clear his name once and for all. But as the moment drew near, Mark refused. His excuse? He had been drinking the night before and couldn't take the test. Then, in June 2013, months after the search for Dylan Redwine had begun, a breakthrough finally occurred. Search teams, exhausted but relentless, continued to scour the mountainous terrain near Mark's home, hoping for any trace of Dylan. And then, something was found. It wasn't much at first, just partial remains, but it was enough. Bones, including the clavicle and tibia, scattered across the rugged landscape, revealed themselves to the investigators. They were located about 8 miles from Mark's house, in a remote area that only added to the suspicion. The location of the remains alone was chilling, a place that Mark knew well, a place he could have easily accessed by ATV, and a place he had appeared to avoid searching, despite having lived so close.
A 6-month-long search for teen Dylan Redwine has ended in the worst possible way. The La Plata County Sheriff's Office just confirmed it has found the 13-year-old's remains. Authorities say a variety of remains, including bones, were collected during a 5-day search of Middle Mountain Road. That's in Bayfield, Colorado, within sight of Iosito Lake, the area where Dylan was last seen.
The bones were sent for DNA testing, and the confirmation hit hard. These were Dylan's remains. The relief that this discovery brought was quickly overshadowed by the devastating realization that Dylan was gone. His life was taken long before this discovery. For Elaine and Corey, the discovery of the remains brought a finality they weren't ready for. But it didn't end the agony. but the bones found in the forest didn't answer all the questions. Dylan's skull, along with key parts of his body, remained unaccounted for. Elaine couldn't shake the thought that there was more to the story, and that Mark knew something he wasn't telling. While investigators were still piecing together clues, Mark took a different approach. He started recording a video, attempting to demonstrate his version of events. In this video, he tried to explain what he thought happened to his son. He speculated that Dylan had been attacked by a bear, an argument that seemed more absurd than plausible. But that wasn't all. Mark also suggested that someone else could have murdered Dylan and staged the scene. Then in November 2015, nearly 3 years after Dylan Redwine's disappearance, hikers made a chilling discovery. While walking through a remote area in the San Juan Mountains, around 5 miles from where the initial remains were found, they stumbled upon what appeared to be a human skull. Authorities were immediately called to the scene, and the skull was quickly retrieved. The discovery was a turning point in the case. Although the partial remains had been found years earlier, the skull had eluded search teams. This new piece of evidence provided a clearer picture of the cause of death. A forensic examination confirmed that the skull bore signs of blunt force trauma, and the fracture marks indicated that the injuries had occurred before death. This ruled out the theory that Dylan's death had been caused by an animal attack, which had been suggested earlier in the investigation. In the days leading up to the discovery of Dylan's skull, Mark Redwine was spotted in an unusual place. He was seen driving down a mountain road, one that led directly to the area where Dylan's remains would later be found. This raised immediate alarms for investigators. It seemed like an odd coincidence, especially considering the intense search efforts being conducted nearby. Mark's behavior took another strange turn when he spoke to a journalist. He claimed that he had been hospitalized for paranoia, and that his paranoia stemmed from the belief that he was being stalked. According to Mark, he had been self-medicating to cope with the stress, further adding to the list of bizarre and contradictory actions. The recovery of the skull was significant not only because it confirmed Dylan's death was a homicide, but also because it led to Mark Redwine being officially named a suspect. The investigators could now say with certainty that Dylan hadn't just disappeared. He had been murdered. The arrest of Mark Redwine came on July 7, 2017, just over 5 years after Dylan's disappearance. By this time, investigators had gathered enough evidence to charge him with second-degree murder and California, resulting in death. The case had been under investigation for years, and the discovery of Dylan's skull had tipped the scales against Mark. Mark was arrested in Bellingham, Washington, while he was working as a truck driver. The arrest itself was swift, with authorities moving in quickly as soon as they had confirmation that Mark was in the area.
Let's put him down, lay him down, and we'll move up. Nick, Bean, and Dolly will grab him. But let's put him on the ground, stomach, arms out. There's a passenger, Just keep your hands up, buddy. Just keep your hands up.
Don't move, bud, okay? Do not move. Drop a cigarette.
You guys can, you'll explain to me what's going on?
Yes, sir. Is your name Mark?
Yes, it is.
The reason why you're in handcuffs right now is because we received a call from an agency in Colorado. What had happened is they had got information that you were potentially up here, and they said that they had a warrant for murder second. I'm sorry?
I have no idea what that's about.
Okay.
My question to the other officer was,
sure,
when was this issued?
I don't know when it was issued. I know it's an active warrant, and that's how the call came into us, is that they're saying that this warrant's in the system and that they had information that you were potentially in this area working in your trucking job.
Once in custody, Mark was transported back to Colorado, where he faced charges related to his son's death. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Mark continued to deny any involvement in Dylan's death. He maintained that he had nothing to do with the disappearance and that Dylan had likely run away. The years-long wait for the trial had been filled with delays, legal battles, and moments that tested the patience of Dylan's family. The trial was initially set to begin in 2019, but legal motions from Mark's defense, a crowded court schedule, and the request for a change of venue all contributed to delays. The COVID-19 pandemic then struck, further pushing the trial back indefinitely. And just when it seemed like things could finally move forward, a new setback occurred. Mark's defense attorney, John Moran, was arrested for domestic violence in 2021, prompting more delays. Mark Redwine's trial for the murder of his son Dylan began on June 21, 2021, in La Plata County, Colorado. The proceedings were closely followed by the media and the community, as the family of Dylan, as well as the public, anxiously awaited the outcome of a case that had haunted the region for nearly a decade. The trial spanned over 5 weeks, during which both the defense and the prosecution presented their arguments, introducing new evidence and testimonies that painted a disturbing picture of the father-son relationship. The defense tried to dismantle the prosecution's case, casting doubt on the blood evidence and the cadaver dog findings. They insisted that Dylan's death could have been caused by a wild animal, perhaps even a bear, and argued that the minimal amount of blood found at Mark's home was insufficient to prove his involvement. Mark's attorney, John Moran, went on to claim that there was no definitive evidence linking Mark to the crime, and suggested that the case was based on circumstantial evidence and speculation. However, the prosecution had a much stronger case. They presented the disturbing photos found on Mark's laptop, the lingerie photos and the grotesque image of him consuming feces from a diaper, as crucial evidence. These images, the prosecution argued, revealed the twisted nature of Mark's behavior and provided insight into his violent tendencies. They also highlighted the text messages from Dylan, showing the tension and resentment he felt toward his father. The prosecution further emphasized the blood found throughout Mark's house, pointing to it as critical evidence that linked him to the crime. They argued that Mark's inconsistent statements and odd behavior after Dylan's disappearance were further signs of his involvement. Then came the bombshell testimony from Mark's ex-wife, Betsy, who recounted a chilling conversation from years before. She explained how Mark had once casually stated that if he ever had to someone, he would hide the body in the mountains because it was so vast and no one would ever find it. At the time, Betsy had brushed it off, but in light of Dylan's disappearance, the comment now seemed hauntingly prescient.
And we went camping once we got up to the campsite, kind of looking around, and he had made a comment that this would be a good place to leave body because it was mountains and they're so vast. Nobody would ever find a body.
After 5 weeks of tense courtroom drama, the jury deliberated for just 6 hours before reaching their verdict. On July 16, 2021, Mark Redwine was convicted on charges of second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. The verdict brought closure to the long, painful chapter for Elaine, Corey, and the rest of Dylan's family. They had endured years of uncertainty, grief, and frustration as they tried to uncover the truth.
There was always something that I was learning from him. You never know when the one person that you thought would always be with you by your side, walk and talk with you, would, suddenly just be gone one day.
This past year has been a struggle. I've struggled with the events that have taken place and why this happened to Dylan.
In the end, justice was served, but it came at a heavy cost. Dylan's life was tragically cut short, and the scars left on his family would remain forever. Mark Redwine was sentenced on October 8, 2021, after being convicted in July of second-degree murder and child abuse, resulting in death for the murder of his son, Dylan Redwine. Mark was sentenced to 48 years in prison, served concurrently for both charges, provided some sense of finality, but it didn't erase the devastating loss. He would be eligible for parole in 2052, when he would be 90 years old, but it seemed highly unlikely that he would ever be released. As the case came to an end, it left a profound impact on the community and those who followed it. It was a stark reminder of the complexities of family dynamics, the danger of unresolved anger, and the devastating consequences of toxic relationships. Dylan's story, as tragic as it was, had ignited a fire in those who had followed it. A fire to fight for justice and to ensure that the voices of victims like Dylan would never be silenced. As we reflect on this case, we are reminded of the importance of seeking justice for those who can no longer speak for themselves. Dylan's family had done everything they could, and now it's up to the rest of us to ensure that justice remains a priority, no matter how difficult the road may be. Let this case remind us to never back down in the fight for truth and justice, no matter how long it takes. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We bring you detailed, in-depth coverage on stories that matter, keeping you informed and engaged. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue to tell these important stories. Thank you for watching.